Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of March of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Bakhmut Artyomov's direction. And let's talk about Ivanivske. As you can see, I have updated the map, and now the fields between Popovo Forest, Bakhmut and Ivanivske itself are under complete Russian control. And today we got the final geolocations confirming the Russian progress. The geolocations were published by the Ukrainian side. For example, on this video of 92nd Separate Assault Brigade, we can see the Ukrainian FPV drones flying above the Russian positions, and we're bombing them with FPV grenades and different explosives. So this video we can use to confirm the Russian progress. And if you take a look at the video, you're going to see that most of the bombings took place between the Artyomov line and the beginning of Shirokaya Street. So these are two geolocations from that video. Also, the Ukrainians published another video from the fields to the northeast of Ivanivske. On this video, we can see the series of FPV drone strikes of FPV drone operator squad of 17th Tank Brigade from the area. Lots of strikes, some of them were geolocated, some of them weren't geolocated, but one of the geolocation of, for example, of this tank was this strike took place in the fields in this area. So based on those geolocations, we made the conclusion that all these fields and all these areas are under complete Russian control. So approximately this is more or less the situation in the town. Currently we still haven't received anything from the central part, but for example today, according to some Russian sources, the Russians have already established control over the central part, over the northern part, and currently the main clashes are taking place just for three areas. The Ukrainians are concentrated in Zarechny Street, in the let's say the beginning of Zarechny Street, the beginning of Zelena Green Street, and in the farms that located to the southwest of the settlement. So this is approximately the area of concentration of Ukrainian forces according to the Russians, and currently the main clashes are taking place here. But I don't agree with this information, because as we discussed, the main Ukrainian position is located in this hill, and from this hill within a distance of less than 1.5 kilometers, the Ukrainians control the situation and can control the movement of the Russian forces along Shirokaya Street, along Zarechny Street, so basically on the north central and the northwestern part of the village. So that's why we can make a conclusion, and based on the facts and based on the geolocations, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians are trying to storm the southern part of Ivanivske and the south central part of the village. So if we add some polygons and areas on the map, currently this is the main Russian focus. This is it. And after the Russians establish control over the territory, over this territory, probably they will start moving further to the north and to the west with the purpose to establish control over the final streets and to force the Ukrainians to completely fall back from the territory. And anyway, once again, we just received geolocations from the fields, but very likely the Russians managed to move further, and currently the main clashes are taking place in the central part. Anyway, I'll repeat the main idea that the days of Ivanivske are numbered, and after that the Russians will make the decision where to move further. Either to attack Chasiv Yar, which is unlikely because there is still a lot of job to do. Regarding the significant number of videos of Russian strikes, Russian attacks in the area, currently this is well fortified and a very powerful stronghold, and it's not a very good idea to attack Bogdanovka and Chasiv Yar, the eastern part of the village, attacking in front. The best solution for these purposes is to bypass the area from the south and to attack, trying to bypass the area to Chasiv Yar itself through Donbass, Donbass Canal. So I assume that after the end of the battle for Ivanivske, the Russians will concentrate it over Klishchiivka. And the reports that the Russians entered Klishchiivka and forced Ukrainians to fall back weren't confirmed neither by the Russians nor the Ukrainian side. So the clashes for the ruins or the things that left from Klishchiivka continues. Now we are moving to Avdiivka direction, where we also got a lot of updates from the territory. Let's start from Berdichev. As you can see, the main geolocations are coming from this territory. The Ukrainian sources published the video of FPV droning of Russian positions along these trenches, along these fortifications, which confirms the Russian progress. The Russian forces managed to reach the abandoned Abrams in the eastern part of Berdichi. And for example, on this video, we can see how the Russian soldier was making selfies with the tank, probably for Instagram or Facebook, and he's going probably to publish this very soon. This is the Russian soldier. He was sitting in front of the tank, and probably somebody to the right of this video was filming him. Furthermore, we got additional geolocated footage of the Russians staying and making photos and selfies with the Leopard that was captured also in the vicinity of Avdiivka probably a few days ago. When talking about the situation on the ground and the current positions, we got just one geolocation, how the Russian FPV drone was attacking the Ukrainian forces, the Ukrainian evacuation machines, or let's say some armored vehicles in the western part of the village, which confirms the Ukrainian presence and the Ukrainian control over the central street of the village and this part. Currently, we don't know for sure, we don't know the status of this stronghold in the cemetery, but very likely the Russians have already bypassed and moved further. Now we are moving to Orlovka, the town that located between Tonenke and Berdichi. Today we got more geolocations from the Ukrainian sources. The 3rd Azov Brigade published the videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces in this part, in the central part of Orlovka. The Ukrainians were bombing and attacking with FPV drones the Russian positions. Lots of buildings were reduced to ruins, very heavy, very powerful drones, as you can see. And this video confirms the Russian progress and the Russian control over the central part. So we have adjusted the map. Currently, the Ukrainians control just the north-east western triangle, the intersection of Novoselov Street and Yelena Street, this one. But very likely during the next few days, we're going to receive more updates about the further Russian progress, further Russian attempt to force the Ukrainians to completely fall back from this line, from this defense belt. Yet we haven't received any updates regarding the status of this part of Berdichi, of Orlovka, Bratiev Pauhovik. This is the western part of Bratiev Pauhov Street. Very likely that this street is also under complete Russian control. When talking about Tonenke, after the Russians entered the farms that located in the central part, we haven't received anything about further Russian progress. Very likely the Russians currently are storming the farms that located to the southwest of the village. We're talking about these farms, because if the Russians are able to establish control over the farms and to take this territory under complete control, then the Russians will be able to get the operational space. And because after the farms there are no more towns, cities, just fields and tree lines, and from these farms the Russians will be able to attack Umanska. The Russians will be able to continue advancing further to Pervomaiska and Nitailova. The Russians will be able through the fields to attack further in the direction of Yasnobrodovka. So this is very important operational space, and Russians, by taking these farms, don't even need to finish the battle for the rest of Tonenke, but obviously this territory will be also captured by the Russians. So this is very important. And once again, the Russians are fighting for this defense belt that goes through Karlovka water reservoir, Umanskaya, Orlovka, and Severna, Semyonovka, and Berdichi. And the thing is that currently the Russians haven't managed to break through this defense belt, but only after the Russians are able to establish control over Semyonovka. This is Semyonovka. Only after that we can say that the Russians managed to break through this defense belt and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. And once again, if the Russians are able to capture Semyonovka, they will be able to get the operational space in this direction as well, and it's going to be a disaster for the Ukrainians. We got another video of the use of FAP 1500 in the village by the name of Ocheretina, one of the most important Ukrainian defense stronghold and belts. And this is a very rare footage from the area, because I don't remember when exactly. It's very rare footage from the area. Usually the Russians are using FAPs in different directions, but now they're also concentrated here. Maybe that means something about further Russian plans or something like this. Now we are moving further to Nivoyskaya area, Pervomayskaya area. The Russians continue offensive operation along the main streets in Pervomaysk, but the offensive operation, as you can see, is very slow, very difficult and very slow. Furthermore, the Russians during the previous 24 hours published few footages of, let's say, attacks against Ukrainian temporary positions. On this video, we can see concentration of Ukrainian forces. They brought some reinforcements, some supply and support to the northwestern part of Nitailova. The Russians discovered the area and start bombing this territory with artillery, with Krasnopol, and they managed to destroy this small base of the Ukrainian forces. For now, we don't have any numbers of the losses. During the previous days, the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of Nivoyska, but they still haven't started any ground operation due to, let's say, a significant number of artillery systems in the fields between Nivoyska, Krasnogorovka, and Kurakhova. Now the Russians are in the stage of counter-artillery duels. First, they need to suppress the Ukrainian artillery systems and forces, and after that, they will be able to start the ground operation. When talking about Krasnogorovka, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the town using FAP 1500. There is still a lot of job to do. Today we got additional photos and additional videos of how the Russians were bombing this town with FAP 1500, and the Western sources admits that FAP 1500 is the game changer. The Western countries don't have weapon to counter and to fight with. We haven't received anything from Marinka direction, the same story from Novomikhailivka. After a few more attempts to attack the area, no more updates. And we got lots of updates from Vuhledar direction. On this video, we can see the Russian anti-tank missile. The Russians were attacking using anti-tank missile, the Ukrainian, let's say, building, the Ukrainian infrastructure, this small coal mine that Ukrainians were using for probably some video cameras or some I don't know, communication equipment. And this is the event that took place to the northeast of Vuhledar, but to the southwest of Vuhledar, the Russians made another attempt to attack the Ukrainian positions. The video was published by the 58th Motorized Brigade of Armed Forces of Ukraine. On this video, we can see another Russian convoy, significant number of armored vehicles, tanks, and the personnel moving through the fields in direction of Ukrainian positions. Some of the tanks got on the minefields and were destroyed, but most of them managed to reach the Ukrainian defense belt and to start the clashes in the ground in the trenches. So if we return back to map, the Russians were moving something like this, and when the Russians reached these intersections of the tree lines, one group moved to the northwest and another group moved to the southeast. So that was the Russian maneuver, and as a result of the attack, they managed to improve their positions. When talking about this attack, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians are planning to establish control over something like this and to get as close as possible to Prichistovka from the northwest and to, let's say, get the 0509 road intersection of the roads between Prichistovka, Pavlovka, Shevchenkova to this area. To secure the flanks of Pavlovka, and this operation will allow the Russians to cross Kashlygach river from the west of Vuhledar and to start offensive to Vuhledar from the southwest in this area. Once again, the Russians are about to finish the battle for Novomikhailivka, and the battle for Konstantinovka is about to start. Furthermore, don't forget that the Russians currently are moving from Salotka to Vodyane, so very likely very soon during the next month or two we're going to start, the Russians are going to start the 5th or the 6th storm or assault of Vuhledar. Now we're moving to Robotyne. During the day we have some updates. The Russians established complete control over the main supply road between Novodanilivka and Robotyne. On this video we can see significant number of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian armored vehicles, personnel carriers, light vehicles, evacuation machines. Most of them were damaged or destroyed by the Russian FPV drones, and we see that the problems in Robotyne are very big for the Ukrainians. But regarding all these strikes, regarding this control, the Ukrainians still have forces and resources to repel Russian attacks, and today another attempt of Russian attack was published by the Ukrainian 65th Mechanized Brigade. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians just using FPV drones managed to stop another Russian attack. The Russians were forced to abandon damaged vehicles and to continue offensive on their feet, storming the town from the south. Currently we don't have 100% sure confirmation or picture about the status in the village, so that's where we're going to keep as is. The Russians activated and renewed their offensive and their attacks on Kamyanskaya direction. Today, 3 geolocated videos were published of FPV drone strikes against the Ukrainian forces, and in this area. And this video confirms that very likely the Russians do have some plans to attack, not maybe the primary attack, not just to use this area for the primary attack, but to use this area for the secondary attacks, to force the Ukrainians to keep some reserves in this area and to ease the Russian progress and the Russian movements, probably on Robotyne direction. Now we are moving to Kherson area. The Ukrainians published a lot of videos of FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces along the Kazachil Lagery and Krynki. The Russians from their side published significant number of FAB strikes against the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the towns like Lvova, Pridniprovskaya, Kazatske, Berislav, Novoberislav. So the same story as we used to see in October, September of 2023. Important video we got from Pridniprovskaya area. The Russian reconnaissance group managed to discover the movements of Ukrainian forces in the city. We see the process of rotation of one FPV drone operator squad for another. The Ukrainians started unpacking their car and they start moving their, let's say, stuff to this building, and the Russians were following them. The Russians obviously have already provided the coordinates to proper, let's say, forces. And after the Ukrainians finished rotation process, the Russians destroyed the building with Ulmur, a very accurate missile. As you can see, as a result of strike, the entire building was reduced to ruins, and the FPV drone operator squad of Ukrainian forces appeared under the ruins. We see intensifying of actions in the Dnieper estuary. This is the next area of the heavy clashes. Obviously, the Ukrainians do have some plans for the territory. The Russians published significant number of videos of FAB strikes on the Ukrainian bank of Dnieper River. Lots of temporary positions were destroyed, lots of concentration of forces, possible warehouses were destroyed, and so on. And we see that Ukrainians started the process of concentration of forces on this direction. I'll remind you that the main purpose and the main goal of the Ukrainians is to land their infantry in Kinburn speed and Tendra speed and to establish control over this territory. If the Ukrainians are able to do this, then it will allow them to unblock the Nikolaev port and to increase the Ukrainian, let's say, trade possibilities using fleet. And to do this, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours were under very heavy fire from this island. This key island that Ukrainians use to control the situation on the Kinburn speed. Probably there are a lot of Ukrainians from the special forces, and they're just waiting for an order to start the landing operation in this part of Kherson. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians discovered the concentration of Ukrainian boats that very likely the Ukrainians were planning to use for landing operation. The boats were destroyed. Once again, before the summer of 2024, the Ukrainians will try to make lots of attempts to capture this territory. Now we're moving to southern Kupiansk direction. Today we got report that somebody destroyed the dam to the west of Terny. Currently it's unknown who exactly destroyed. Maybe the Russians destroyed to reduce the Ukrainian logistic possibilities, and maybe the Ukrainians destroyed the dam during the retreat process. They destroyed the dam not to allow the Russians to use the dam as the supply road in the future. We got very rare footage of Lancet strikes in Yampolovka, Terny, Tarskoye and Zarechne. I don't remember when exactly we received the Lancet strikes before, so it's very rare for this area, rare case for the area, but now we see that the Russians start using this type of weapon Lancet more and more. On this video we see the Russians destroy the tank from hidden position, and further to the west in the vicinity of Zarechne the Russians destroy another M777 howitzer of Ukrainian armed forces. All this video confirms the further plans of the Russians to continue clashes. On the Borderlands, the Russians published the video of how they managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces and how they destroyed them with aviation cluster bombs RDK 500. Once again, usually you use this type of weapon when there is like heavy clashes or concentration of forces. The use of this type of weapon on the Borderlands confirms our idea that the Russians do have some plans to start offensive operation very soon. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of March, we see the concentration of Russian fire mainly in this area, and once again something big is going to happen very soon. The Ukrainians are planning to start mobilizations among the prisoners. We just discussed this piece of news before. So there are around 100,000 prisoners in Ukraine, so most of them will be sent to the line of combat contact. The Ukrainian civilians continue attempts to avoid mobilization, and for example, in this video we see how two people, a young man and woman, came to the cemetery. Probably they lost somebody close to them, and the Ukrainian officers were in the cemetery, and basically they capture a young man and send him probably to Avdiivka. Other Ukrainians continue attempts to cross the border with Romania and Moldova. On this video, for example, we can see how Ukrainian, using the mask of Voldemort from Harry Potter, tried to cross the river, but he was captured by the Ukrainians, and probably he shown very good skills of special operations, and very likely if the Ukrainians are ever going to attack towards the Kinburn speed, this guy is going to be in charge and in the head of this special operation. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.